Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at how geopolitical theories have changed over time.
We're going to be going from the ancient world all the way up to the present day.
We have a really fascinating article here called The Evolution of Geopolitical Theories, from Ancient Foundations to Contemporary Thought.
It really is a great piece and covers a lot of ground.
And this is relevant because these ideas, they're not just history. They actually help us understand why countries act the way they do today.
Yeah, you've got wars, alliances, all these big economic strategies. They're all influenced by these theories.
So in this deep dive, we're going to look at the big thinkers, the people who really shaped geopolitics.
And we'll see how their ideas connect, how they've been used and challenged over time.
Exactly. So let's start with the ancients. Where did this all begin?
Well, you can't talk about geopolitics without talking about Thucydides. He was writing about the Peloponnesian War.
Oh, yeah, that was like way back in ancient Greece, right?
Exactly. And what he saw was that fear and self-preservation, those are the big drivers in how states act on the world stage.
So even back then, it was all about power struggles.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And then you have Aristotle. He took it a step further.
Oh, yeah, he was all about logic and systems, wasn't he?
Exactly. He saw this connection between geography and political systems, the kind of societies that develop.
So where you are in the world actually shapes how you govern yourselves.
He really thought that, yeah. He believed that different environments led to different types of governments.
Like you might have democracies in mountainous areas, but monarchies in fertile plains or something like that.
That was his idea, yeah. And it's fascinating because even today, we see how geography plays a role in politics.
Totally. It's like resources and trade routes and all that. I mean, it never really goes away, does it?
Not really. And it wasn't just the Greeks who were thinking about these things.
Oh, really? Who else was there?
Well, there was this incredible scholar, Ibn Khaldun. He lived in the 14th century.
Wow, that's a long time ago.
Yeah, he was way ahead of his time. He came up with this theory about civilizations going through cycles.
So they rise and fall.
Exactly. And he said geography and the environment, they play a big role in those cycles.
So like a civilization might flourish in a good environment, but then decline when things change.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And his book, The Muqaddimah, it's like this incredible exploration of these patterns.
It's amazing how these early thinkers were already grappling with such complex ideas.
It really laid the foundation for everything that came after.
Okay, so let's move on then. What happened in the Renaissance and early modern period? How did those foundational ideas evolve?
Well, you've got Machiavelli. He was all about power.
Ah, yes, the prince.
Exactly. And while he didn't focus solely on geography, he understood its importance in maintaining control.
So rulers needed to be aware of their surroundings and use them to their advantage.
Yeah, he was a real pragmatist and maybe even a little cynical, but he had a point.
Power can be a tricky game,
Yeah.
right? So was everyone in that era so focused on power?
Not exactly. You also had Immanuel Kant. He had a very different vision.
Oh, Kant, he was all about reason and morality, wasn't he?
Exactly. He believed in this idea of perpetual peace through cooperation.
So basically the opposite of Machiavelli.
Kind of, yeah. Kant thought that republican governments and international organizations could help prevent war.
So we've got this tension between power politics and idealism. It's interesting how those themes keep popping up throughout history.
It's a constant struggle. And then you have Karl von Clausewitz. He focused on the military side of things.
Oh, yeah, he was a military strategist, right?
Exactly. And he had this famous saying, war is merely the continuation of politics by other means.
So war isn't just about fighting, it's about achieving political goals.
Right. And geography is crucial to military strategy. You need to know the terrain, the resources, the choke points.
It's all connected. So these thinkers, they really started to formalize our understanding of how geopolitics works.
They provided the building blocks for the theories that would come later, and those theories have really shaped the world we live in today.
All right, so let's dive into those modern theories then. What were some of the key developments that changed the game?
Well, one of the biggest names is Sir Halford Mackinder. He's considered the father of geopolitics.
Wow, that's a pretty big title. What did he do?
He came up with this theory called the heartland theory. He said that whoever controlled the heartland of Eurasia...
The heartland, so like the center of the continent?
Yeah, basically that they would control the world.
That's a bold statement. Why Eurasia, though?
He thought it was the most strategically important landmass because it had so many resources and it was so centrally located.
So kind of like the key to global domination.
Exactly. And his ideas were super influential, especially during the World Wars and the Cold War.
It's amazing how these theories can shape the course of history.
But it wasn't just about land power. Alfred Thayer Mahan had a different perspective.
Oh, yeah, he was all about the Navy, wasn't he?
Exactly. He believed in sea power. He said that controlling the seas and trade routes was the key to global influence.
So it was like a battle between land power and sea power.
In a way, yeah. And both of these theories had a huge impact on how countries thought about strategy.
So who was right? Were the land powers destined to rule, or was it the ones who controlled the seas?
Well, it's not so simple. There's always this interplay between different factors. But both Mackinder and Mahan, they highlighted crucial aspects of geopolitics.
And their ideas are still debated today, right?
Oh, absolutely. They're still relevant because geography and power, they're always going to be important.
Okay, so we've got Mackinder and Mahan with their competing theories. Who else was in the mix?
Well, one of Mackinder's students, Nicholas Spykman, he kind of built on the heartland theory.
How so?
He came up with this idea called the rimland theory. He said it wasn't just about controlling the heartland, it was about controlling the rimland.
The rimland? What's that?
The coastal areas around Eurasia. So like Western Europe, the Middle East, Southeast Asia.
So he thought those areas were even more important than the heartland.
In a way, yeah. He said that the rimland had access to both land and sea power, so it was even more strategically valuable.
Wow, that's interesting. So how did that theory influence things?
It had a big impact on U.S. foreign policy during the Cold War. They were all about containing the Soviet Union, which was seen as a heartland power.
So they wanted to control the rimland to keep the Soviets in check.
Exactly. And that's why the U.S. got involved in so many conflicts around the world. Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan.
It's all connected. It's like a big geopolitical chessboard.
It really is. And then you have Karl Haushofer, a German geographer. He had some controversial ideas.
Controversial? How so?
Well, he combined geography with this idea of expansionism. He said that Germany needed Lebensraum living space.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that term before.
Yeah.
It was used to justify Nazi aggression.
Exactly. And Haushofer's ideas, while problematic, they did influence geopolitical thought in general.
It's a reminder that these theories can be used for good or for bad.
Absolutely. They're powerful tools, but they need to be used responsibly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from ancient Greece to Nazi Germany. It's fascinating to see how these ideas have evolved over time.
And it's not over yet. We're still grappling with these same issues today.
So let's move on then. What happened during the Cold War, and how did geopolitical thinking change in the face of this new global order?
Well, the Cold War was like a giant geopolitical experiment. It was a clash between two superpowers with very different ideologies.
Yeah, and it played out all over the world, didn't it?
Exactly. And the theories we've talked about, they were put to the test.
So let's see how those ideas shaped the strategies and policies of the Cold War superpowers.
Yeah, let's dive into that next.
Yeah, so the Cold War really put these geopolitical theories to the test. It was a clash of ideologies, but also a battle for global influence.
And a lot of it played out in Eurasia, right? That's where those heartland and rimland theories come in.
Exactly. One of the key figures in shaping U.S. Cold War strategy was George Kennan.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of him. He was a diplomat and historian, right?
Yeah, and he's known for his idea of containment.
Containment, like containing the Soviet Union.
Exactly. He believed that the U.S. had to stop the spread of Soviet influence around the world. And how did that connect to the geopolitical theories we've been talking about?
Well, Kennan was heavily influenced by Spykman's rimland theory.
So he saw the rimland as this crucial buffer zone.
Right. The U.S. and its allies had to control the rimland to prevent the Soviet Union from expanding.
And that's why the U.S. got involved in so many places like Korea, Vietnam, even Afghanistan.
Exactly. It was all about containing Soviet influence, and that meant securing key areas in the rimland.
So it was like a giant game of chess with the superpowers moving their pieces around the board.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And another big thinker during the Cold War was Zbigniew Brzezinski.
Oh, yeah, he was a national security advisor to President Carter, right?
Exactly. And he also emphasized the strategic importance of Eurasia.
So he was kind of in the same camp as Mackinder and Spykman?
In a way, yeah. He wrote this book called The Grand Chessboard, where he argued that the U.S. had to dominate Eurasia to maintain global power.
Dominate. That's a strong word.
Yeah, Brzezinski was a realist. He believed that geopolitics was all about power and that the U.S. had to play the game to win.
So even after the Cold War, this idea of controlling Eurasia is still relevant.
Absolutely. China's rise is a perfect example. They're expanding their influence across Eurasia through things like the Belt and Road Initiative.
And the U.S. is trying to counter that by strengthening its alliances in the region.
Exactly. It's like a new chapter in the same old geopolitical story.
So even though the players have changed, the game is still the same.
Pretty much. But it's not just about geography anymore. Other factors have become increasingly important.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, culture. Samuel Huntington argued that future conflicts would be driven by clashes of civilizations.
Oh yeah, that's a controversial theory.
It is.
Yeah.
But it highlights the growing importance of cultural and religious identities in global politics.
So it's not just about who controls the land or the sea anymore. It's also about who controls the hearts and minds.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And then there's the economic dimension.
Oh, right. The world is so interconnected now economically.
Exactly. And that's where geoeconomics comes in.
Geoeconomics. So using economic tools to achieve geopolitical goals.
Exactly. Things like trade agreements, sanctions, strategic investments.
It's like a softer form of power.
In a way, yeah. But it can be just as effective as military force.
So we've gone from controlling land to controlling sea to controlling economies.
It's all part of the same game. It's about using whatever tools you have to advance your interests on the world stage.
It's fascinating to see how these geopolitical ideas have evolved over time.
And it's even more fascinating to see how they're playing out in the world today.
So let's look at some specific examples then. How are these theories shaping contemporary events, and what can they tell us about the future of geopolitics?
Let's dive into that next. So we've talked about all these theories, but how do they actually play out in the real world?
Yeah, let's look at some specific examples, like what's happening right now that shows these theories in action.
Well, the biggest one has got to be the U.S.-China rivalry, right?
Yeah, that's all over the news. Everyone's talking about it.
And for good reason. It's a clash between two superpowers, each trying to increase their influence.
And a lot of it is happening in Eurasia, which makes sense if you think about those heartland and rimland theories.
Exactly. China is right in the heart of Eurasia, and they're actively expanding their power.
Like with that Belt and Road Initiative, right? That's all about connecting China to the rest of Eurasia and beyond.
Exactly. It's a classic example of a heartland power trying to solidify its position.
And the U.S. is obviously not too happy about that.
Well, they're trying to counter China's influence by strengthening their alliances in the region.
So it's like a new Cold War, but with different players.
Kinda,
Wow.
yeah. But the underlying geopolitical dynamics are similar.
It's all about controlling key areas and resources.
Exactly. And another hotspot is the South China Sea.
Oh, yeah. That's been in the news a lot, too. Lots of territorial disputes there.
Exactly. And it's a prime example of how sea power still matters.
China is building up its navy and trying to assert its dominance in those waters.
And the U.S. is pushing back by conducting freedom of navigation operations.
So it's a direct clash between Mahan's sea power theory and the idea of containing China's influence.
Exactly. It shows that even in the 21st century, those old theories still have relevance.
It's amazing how they keep popping up in different forms.
Yeah, geopolitics is like a game with constantly changing rules, but the basic principles remain the same.
And it's not just about military power anymore, right?
Economics has become a huge factor. That's where geoeconomics comes in.
Like with the trade war between the U.S. and China.
Exactly. They're using tariffs and sanctions as weapons to try to gain an advantage.
It's a whole new way of fighting, but it's still about power and influence.
Absolutely. And it shows that in today's world, you need to be able to wield economic power just as effectively as military power.
So it's like a multi-dimensional chess game with economics, technology, and military all playing a role.
Exactly. And it's a game that's constantly evolving.
So what's the takeaway here? What should people keep in mind about all this?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that geopolitics matters. It shapes the world we live in, even if we don't always realize it.
It's not just some abstract theory. It's about real people and real events.
Exactly. And these theories, they can help us understand why things happen the way they do.
They give us a framework for analyzing complex situations.
Right. And even though the world is changing rapidly, those underlying geopolitical principles, they're still relevant.
So we need to stay informed and keep learning about these ideas.
Absolutely. Because the better we understand geopolitics, the better equipped we'll be to navigate the challenges of the 21st century.
Well said. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of geopolitics.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, keep exploring these ideas and keep asking those tough questions. It's the only way we can make sense of this crazy world.
Until next time, stay curious.
And keep diving deep.